We will now move on to blockchain technology and financial inclusion. Sofie Blakstad, I'm pronouncing your name in Norwegian, spent most of her career building banks. Having built 8 banks in over 60 countries worth more than $1 billion, she decided that what the world did not need was another bank. Hence, HiveOnline was born. She's also the author of Fintech Revolution. Fabian still leads Unicef Ventures, and if we're lucky, he will make us do some exercise. Miyaguchi is Executive Director of Ethereum. It was launched in 2015 and is now the world-leading programmable blockchain with its own cryptocurrency called Ether. And to guide us through it all, Kari Mo Jacobsen is back on stage. Welcome them.
Okay, we can get some more glasses. Okay, we heard earlier today that apparently you can't have a conference these days without talking about blockchain. We think that you can, but in this case, we just couldn't resist the opportunity to have 3 great panelists on stage that can not only talk about blockchain, but that can really talk about how this is relevant for the development sector. So thank you all for joining us for this. Really look forward to hearing your points. I think we'll start with you, Aya, since you represent the Etherium Foundation. So it has been said already many times today that we hear this buzzword about blockchain. Could you just explain to us very briefly and simply in layman's terms what blockchain is?
Sure. Well, before that, I would like to correct my profile, how I was impressed. I'm Executive Director of the Etherium Foundation. Since Ethereum is an open source project, no one owns it. And then we do everything about the Ethereum ecosystem. So how blockchain works. So I hate people are trying to start with trying to understand how block works and how chain works. That it's not really for non-technical people. It's not easy to understand. You can see that online. So I like to explain in a very, very, very simple way. So blockchain is a decentralized database supported by a decentralized network, which is that is kind of like a simple definition. But I personally see it as something that actually restores the balance that society lost, and that's how I got into blockchain. But anyway, so when a transaction happens, let's say if Chris sends Sofie Ether, and that is that coin doesn't really move, you don't see coin physically move between them, but there's a database in the cloud that you can just see is a cloud spreadsheet in the cloud, and then the balance of Chris, 1 Ether is taken off from Chris' balance, and then 1 Ether is added to Sofie's balance, and that's how blockchain works, and then that's actually also how this is secured and verified is by decentralized networks. So it's actually normally when you watch a transaction in normal conventional systems such as bank system, you try to secure by making it more private and more closed. But this is you make it open as possible, and everyone can see it, so you can't cheat it. So that's how blockchain works, and that's a simple system that originally Bitcoin. Satoshi's Bitcoin started kind of introducing, and Ethereum has extra function to it, which is smart contract, And by having smart contract, you can add other functions, any functions. Smart contract is like Vitalik normally said it's like vending machine. When you put a coin in, and then you will get a bottle of water, right? It's another agreement or contract, like a paper, like the contract on the paper. When A happens, B happens. And by having that function, the potential of blockchain has got a lot broader and also a lot bigger. And then, yeah, that's the simple way of explaining blockchain.
Thank you. Could you give us some examples of what type of uses you could see for smart contracts that you were just mentioning?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of people know about, like cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and other coins that you can use as almost as money. But with smart contract, you can do a lot more different things in very different areas, in areas like supply chain, digital ID, healthcare, entertainment, or real estate, of course, financial and legal. Well, if I give some examples, actually, new area is actually insurance. And for example, in Sri Lanka, only 7% of the total 21 million population of people had some sort of insurance. And in the agriculture industry, it's less than 1%. And that's actually 20% of the total economy of the country. That means that their economy gets affected by this unpredictable weather. So normal, like a regular conventional insurance doesn't cover that. But with smart contract, that includes the using weather index attached into smart contract. Farmers can actually receive insurance automatically in a more secure and also transparent way. And that's one example. And there is also there was a talk about identification. Providing digital identification is a new thing, but then like how do you actually provide that? Is by using blockchain, you can provide identities in more transparent and more it's more like your identification is supposed to be yours. No one else, including governments, shouldn't control that. Or if you think about regular ID, like I have this piece of driver's license that I normally use as ID. How can you actually trust this to be my ID? That's because people trust this to be my ID. But there are areas that cannot provide IDs by the government or by other authorities. But you can actually socially create your own ID that can be more trusted or more fair, depending on the area where you are in. And also, you can actually hash your biometric information, put that into blockchain. That's actually is accessible from anywhere in the world, as long as that's within the network.
Thank you. So Chris, I hear that Unicef Innovation has recently launched a crypto fund in collaboration with Ethereum. Could you tell us a little bit about what this crypto fund will do?
Thanks. So, I think I'm still running Unicef's venture team. We'll see if that lasts till the end of this session. But thanks again for having us on here. So the Etherium Foundation is one of the donors, and is in fact our first donor, for a crypto-denominated fund. What that means is that we've created a structure inside of the UN that can take advantage of the two capacities Aya described. One is this decentralized database that exists in a lot of different places at one time. And the second is that transparency of movement. If anybody's worked in a big bureaucracy, you know that decentralization may be a part of a big bureaucracy, transparency usually isn't. One of the features of the bureaucracy is opacity. And that's because structures build up over time and it's hard to see through them. And that's what big bureaucracies do, and that's how they work. What we've tried to do with this crypto fund is to take money in this case, take Ether from the Ethereum Foundation and take a little bit of Bitcoin, another one of the major cryptocurrencies, bring them into Unicef. Again, as I described, the money doesn't actually move physically, but some ledger lines change. And then once we're holding them as crypto assets, as digital assets in Unicef, move them to companies that are building digital public goods or digital public assets, and have that all happen in a way that's totally transparent. And this is really cool, because when the government of Norway gives us money to the... I'll still have my job at the end of this talk, right? When the government of Norway gives us money, it goes into a Unicef bank account, and it takes a little while for that to happen. And then for us to get it out of there takes a little bit more time. And the government of Norway sees a report, but it sees that usually quite a bit later. In UN time, usually like 2 years, our team does it pretty much instantly, but there's still a lag of about a month. And you don't know exactly where that euro, that dollar, that kroner went and came from, and all of that. It's obfuscated. When Ethereum Foundation gives us 1 Ether, you can see it, and any one of you can go to the website and see exactly how that money was spent, which is both amazing and horrifying at the same time. So we were sitting in Japan about 2 months ago when the first about $30,000 worth of digital assets came from the Ethereum Foundation to our office in France. That took about 4 seconds. It came then to our office in New York, but just the ledger line changed, another 3 seconds. And then it was 2 in the morning in Osaka, and we watched people press a few buttons securely and everything else. And then it went to a company in Mexico and a company in Argentina who were able to use it to start funding software developers building all of the kind of wonderful stuff we've heard about today. And that all happened in less than a minute. And you could see it. And it was incredible. And it was just the beginning. This stuff doesn't really work yet. It kind of works, but it doesn't really, really work. But it will work, and you know it will work because Starbucks, for example, has about $1 billion of digital assets held up in their Starbucks gift cards. Those digital assets are a lot like cryptocurrency. You can think of them as things that float around in that weird cloud space, and you can access them to buy a coffee, but they're stuck. They're locked inside Starbucks' system, and unless you have that card, you can't get at it. And so what we're doing is looking forward to a UN that's going to be able to use these types of digital finances more natively, which we couldn't do 2 years ago, but through the process of lawyers and finance experts and everybody else, and with the help of Aya and her team, we've been able to classify these digital assets as something we can use. And so hopefully that will allow us to pay for some of the digital public goods in a way that's super transparent, and that means that we'll be getting better value for the money we put in, but also we'll be able to support more startups who are building new things in the markets that we work in. So we're super excited, and if you want to read more about the UNICEF Cryptocurrency Fund, it is not only online, but it's available for donations. If you'd like to send us some Ether or Bitcoin, the wallets are public.
Amazing. Yeah, you already answered several of my other questions.
I did that on purpose, and nobody had to wiggle their fingers.
Great. Appreciate it.
But you can if you want to. You wiggle away.
So let's move to you, Sofie. So we heard introduction that you worked a lot on financial inclusion, not building banks anymore. And you worked on implementing blockchain projects, for example, and projects for financial inclusion on the ground.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about this example that you've done in Niger?
Yeah, sure. So we are a fintech startup, and donations gladly accepted.
We would take some equity in you guys, but we'll take donations from them.
I've got a round coming up, I'll talk about it. So we started out by building an app for Danish micro businesses to validate that they were trustworthy. You may not think that trust is a problem in Denmark, but it is in some sectors, especially construction. I don't know if anyone's ever had builders. But we quickly pivoted we always wanted to go into Africa. I've worked in Africa a lot. My team is a third African. And we were approached by CARE, who said, we think you've got the technology we need to support our savings groups. Now, I don't know if people are familiar with savings groups in Africa and other places. I would assume this audience knows a bit about that. So CARE invented the Village Savings and Loans Association 30 years ago in Niger. It was the first country in the world where they went live. They've been running there for nearly 30 years, and they now have 800,000 members, which makes them the largest financial institution in the country, larger than the entire banking sector, but it's all in cash. So these ladies, they're mostly ladies, have saved money, they've empowered themselves economically tremendously, they've built businesses, but the actual amount of money they have is very small, and they still face the challenge of borrowing because they have no digital records and no identity on the whole. So what we have done is we do have a live blockchain which works, which is helping these ladies to build identity, to build records of their behaviors in their savings groups. So if they turn up to a meeting, if they put money in, if they take out a loan, if they pay it back, other types of behaviors. We don't just measure financial activity. And at the same time, we give them the ability to borrow from the formal financial sector. So we're building bridges between the informal sector, which is huge and very important, as it is in many developing countries, and the formal sector, so that both can interact. But what we've actually learned while we've been doing that is we're not just working with a microfinance institution that is a formal, licensed, been there for a while, run by an ex-banker, offices in Niamey. We're also finding microfinance institutions that have been developed within the savings groups. So these ladies have independently set up their own community finance. So going back to blockchain, the distributed nature of blockchain lends itself to what we see in these savings groups, which is distributed community trust. The challenge that they have is that they can't use that trust in formal relationships, in formal business relationships. So we are purely using existing community bonds, existing social bonds, digitizing those so that these ladies can now continue to grow their businesses, can work on bigger projects, on more formal projects, and build wealth in their communities without massive bank charges, without being beholden to mobile money providers. And importantly, we've built a version that works offline, so similar to Chris's little server. These ladies can now transact in their communities without needing to be connected, which is a huge leap forward, especially in a country like Niger, which is 80% rural population, 60% not really covered by any kind of signal, internet or otherwise, less than 1% internet coverage. So even though we've built a very fault-tolerant app that doesn't need much connectivity, we've now gone one step further and actually used the properties of the blockchain to create distributed systems that don't need to be connected at all. And when they do get connectivity, they sync. You can't do that with mobile money. You can't do that with a bank. So I think that's answered a couple of your other questions as well.
Yeah, thank you. What have you seen as the main opportunities and the main challenges in this project?
So for us, the opportunities and the challenges are the same thing. I think the biggest challenge that most organizations like mine would see is you have a population that is 83% illiterate. These ladies spend an average of 1 year in school. Most of them haven't been exposed to technology yet. We've used that as an opportunity. We're also using the rollout of the app as a way of introducing technical literacy and financial literacy to these groups. So we start with the key holder of the group, the secretary, being the person who enters the details as she would have done previously on exercise books. Then we roll it out gradually to the other members as they get more familiar and comfortable. Then we introduce the digital cash. So it's a slow rollout, but what it's also done is it's enabled us to accelerate the business and financial education that CARE is already doing. So that's a big challenge, also a big opportunity. I think one of the other big opportunities is the fact that CARE has this amazing network and the trust of the people who work with them. I mean, the other one is the infrastructure challenge, but being an ex-infrastructure person, I see that as an opportunity too.
Yeah. Amazing. So I think I would like to give you all the opportunity to summarize where you see the main potential for blockchain in the development sector and for financial inclusion. Should we go back to you, Aya?
Sure. Again, I think this is actually the reason why I got into blockchain space, which was officially 2013. I learned about Bitcoin in 2011, but it is really best for the public goods. And I don't know, just Chris Fabian started this initiative, this public goods platform, but that's something I've been talking about it all the time, which originally no one cared because it's not something that you can make money like very quick. But because of the nature of the actual functions and the benefits of blockchain, it's best for the public goods. And I think emerging markets are the best places for blockchain, any blockchain application, which we call it decentralized applications, to be tested and experimented, and actually create an example to bring it back to anywhere in the world. And so that's something I have wanted to see, and so hopefully we will see that more. I'm seeing that already in Ethereum community, but hopefully we see that more in the future.
What about you, Chris?
So right now there's 70 million children who are on the move as refugees because of violence in the world. 70 million kids. These are children who don't have a government looking after them. Maybe they have a host government for a short time. They don't have a national ID. Maybe they have a temporary ID. They don't have access to a bank account. This number is growing. Climate change is going to affect the world more than we can possibly imagine, and people will be moving further and further away from their homes. If we don't have a way to give people access to money and access to the identity that is necessary to have a sense of dignity in their lives, the world will look even darker in 20 years than it looks like it's going to look now. And so whether or not it's blockchain itself or it's the idea of decentralized identity and access to your own sovereign capacity to exist anywhere in the world, we have to be ready for the change that's coming. And so we're excited to be part of this experience and look at these technologies because we do think they offer a ray of light into an otherwise somewhat dark and gloomy future.
Yeah, I mean, I would say trust builds relationships. The blockchain has been called the Internet of Trust. I think that's a little bit glib, but it's largely true. And in societies where trust is a big challenge, I mean, it's a big challenge everywhere, but where it's the biggest challenge, it has the biggest potential impact to rebalance economies, to rebalance power between the small guys and the big guys. That's where we're playing, and I see that as a huge and global opportunity.
That's an amazing way to round it up. I think we did fairly well on time here as well. Thank you all so much, and please give them a warm applause.